Let's continue with the lecture of Modern History series Home Rule League 1917. First World War and Nationalist Response. After the breakout of the First World War in 1914, the nationalist response to the British participation in the war was threefold. The moderates supported the empire in the war as a matter of duty. The extremists also supported the war efforts. Tilak was released in June 1914 in the belief that Britain would repay India's loyalty with gratitude in the form of self-government. The revolutionaries wanted to utilize the opportunity to wage a war on British rule. The moderates and the extremists failed to see that the imperialist powers were fighting to safeguard their own colonies and markets. Home Rule League movement. The Indian response to the First World War was Home Rule movement, which was a less charged but a more effective way than the revolutionary form adopted by the other party. Two Indian Home Rule Leagues were formed similar to the Irish Home Rule Leagues. Annie Besant and Tilak were the leaders of these two leagues. These two leaders realized the need for cooperation between the moderates and the extremists. They tried to bring two together in 1914, but the rapprochement failed. So in 1915, Annie Besant had launched a campaign to demand self-government for India on the lines of other colonies. He started two newspapers, New India and Commonweal, for campaign. In 1915, in Congress session, the Congress decided to admit the extremists to the Congress, but Congress didn't approve the scheme of Home Rule Leagues of Annie Besant. However, Congress did commit to a program of educative propaganda and for the revival of local level Congress committees. Since they didn't approve, Tilak and Besant set up their separate leagues to avoid any friction. Tilak's Home Rule League. Tilak's league was set up in April 1916. It had six branches restricted to Maharashtra except Bombay City, Karnataka, Central Provinces, and Berar. The demands of the league were the following: Swarajya, formation of linguistic states, and education in the vernacular. Annie Besant's League. Annie Besant's league came up in September 1916 in Madras and covered the rest of India, including Bombay City. Her league had 200 branches. George Avundale was the organizing secretary, and the main work was done by B.W. Wadia and C.P. Ramaswamy Iyer. The aim was to promote the political education, discussion, public meetings, organizing libraries, reading rooms with books on national politics, etc. Who joined the league? Several leaders joined the Home Rule League movement such as Motilal Nehru, Jawaharlal Nehru, Bhulabhai Desai, Chittaranand Das, Muhammad Ali Jinnah, Lala Lajpat Rai, etc. They even became heads of the local branches. Anglo-Indians, most of the Muslims and the non-Brahmins from the south did not join. They thought the home rule would mean the rule of the Hindu majority, especially by the high caste. Fade out of the Home Rule League. The government came down with several severe repression on the movement. Several leaders were arrested. This invoked protests across India. Sir S. Subramaniam Iyer renounced his knighthood against the repression by the government. The Home Rule agitation pettered out in a short time in 1919 because of the following reasons: lack of effective organization, communal riots of 1917 and 18. Moderates who joined the movement were pacified by the Montagu statement in 1917. He announced that the self-government was the long-term goal of British. Tilak had to go abroad in September 1918 in connection with the case. Annie Besant was undecided of her response to the reforms. With Tilak going away to England, Besant couldn't provide efficient leadership. Lucknow session of INC 1916. The Lucknow session, presided over by Ambika Charan Majumdar, readmitted the extremists led by Tilak to the Congress again. To reduce the suspicions of the moderates, Tilak declared that he supported reform of the administration and not an overthrow of the government. This convinced the moderates to readmit the extremists. Another importance of the Lucknow session was the coming together of the Muslim League and Congress. They presented their common demands to the government. The Muslim League was now coming closer to the Congress objectives and turning increasingly anti-imperialist. Reasons for the change in the League's attitude. Britain refused to help Khilafat in Turkey, who had claimed religio-political leadership of all Muslims in the wars in the Balkans. The cancelling of the partition of Bengal in 1911 annoyed the Muslims who had supported the partition. The younger League members were more inclined towards nationalist politics. They were coming out of the limited political outlook of the Aligarh school. The government's repression during the First World War infuriated the Muslims. Maulana Azad's Al-Hilal and the Muhammad Ali's comrade were suppressed. The leaders such as Ali brothers Maulana Azad and Hasrat Mohani faced internment. Details of the Lucknow Pact. Congress accepted the Muslim League's demand for separate electorates, and the League accepted to present joint constitutional demands to the government. The separate electorates were to continue only until any one community demanded joint electorates. The League was also granted a fixed proportion of seats in both the central and provincial legislatures. Montagu's statement of August 1917. Edwin Samuel Montagu was Secretary of State for India. He made a statement in August 20, 1917 in the British House of Commons, which was being called the August Declaration of 1917. The statement was as follows: the government policy is of increasing participation of Indians in every branch of administration and gradual development of self-governing institutions with a view to progressive realization of responsible government in India as an integral part of the British Empire. Resurgence in nationalist activity. The Indian leaders objected to Montagu's statement on lack of time frame and government alone was to decide the nature of the responsible government. Toward the end of the First World War, there was a resurgence of the nationalist activity in India. The struggle against the imperialism in India took a decisive turn with the coming of Gandhi on the Indian political scene. The post-war economic hardships faced by various sections in India also contributed to the rise anti-colonial activities. There was also external reasons which contributed to this resurgence. Post-war hardships. India contributed to the British war efforts in multiple ways, and when war ended, all sections of the Indian population experienced tremendous hardships. There was an increase in prices, and then the recession brought many industries to the brink of closure and loss. Workers and artisans became unemployed and bore the brunt of high prices. The peasantry was burdened with high taxation and pushed into poverty. Educated urban classes was facing unemployment and was suffering from an acute awareness of racism in the attitude of the British. Impact of Russian Revolution. The Bolsheviks in Russia overthrew the Tsarist regime. The Bolshevik Party founded the first socialist state, the Soviet Union, under the leadership of Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov, popularly known as Lenin. The newly formed Soviet Union renounced the Tsarist imperialist rights in China and rest of Asia. They gave rights of the self-determination to former Tsarist colonies in Asia and gave them the equal status to the Asian nationalities within its borders. Montagu helped form for reform.